The cowboy rode into town covered in trail dust, looking for nothing more than a hot meal and a bed that did not move. But what he found instead was a woman's scream coming from beneath the earth itself. Damon Sullivan had been riding for 3 weeks straight from Montana down through Wyoming territory, and Greeley, Colorado seemed like a reasonable place to rest his weary bones in the late summer of 1878. The cattle drive had paid well enough that he could afford a week of decent living before heading back north to find another job. He was 26 years old and had spent the better part of 8 years working cattle across the frontier, never staying in one place long enough to call it home. The sun was setting over the Front Range Mountains when he heard it. He had just tied his horse outside the saloon on Main Street when the sound reached his ears. It was faint, muffled, desperate. Most men would have dismissed it as the wind or perhaps a cat caught somewhere, but Damon had grown up with 3 sisters and he knew the sound of a woman in distress. He stood still, listening. The sound came again, and this time he could make out words. "Please, please, somebody help me." Following the voice, Damon walked past the saloon and down a narrow alley between 2 buildings. The voice grew slightly louder as he approached an old boarding house that looked like it had seen better days. The paint was peeling, the porch sagged, and the windows were dark despite the early evening hour. He walked around the side of the building, past a broken wagon wheel and piles of discarded lumber. "Help me. Please, is anyone there?" The voice was coming from the ground. Damon knelt and pressed his ear to the dirt. There was definitely someone below. He began searching and found what he was looking for behind a stack of old crates, a cellar door, padlocked from the outside with a heavy chain wrapped around the handles. "Hello," he called out. "Can you hear me?" The response was immediate. "Yes, oh God, yes, please, you have to help me. Who are you? What happened?" "My name is Sarah. Sarah Anderson. My family locked me down here. Please, you have to get me out." Damon stood and examined the lock. It was sturdy, new even, which struck him as odd for such a decrepit building. This was not some accident or forgotten storage space. Someone had deliberately imprisoned this woman. "How long have you been down there?" "I don't know anymore. Weeks, I think. Maybe longer. Please, I need water. I need to get out." Anger flared in Damon's chest. Whatever this woman had done, no one deserved to be left to die in a cellar. He looked around for something to break the lock, spotted a rusted iron bar among the debris and picked it up. The weight felt good in his hands. "Stand back from the door," he called down. "I am going to break this lock." It took 4 solid strikes before the lock gave way, the chain falling loose with a metallic clatter. Damon threw open the cellar doors and was immediately hit with the stench of unwashed body, human waste, and despair. He pulled his bandana over his nose and descended the rough wooden stairs into the darkness below. The cellar was small, maybe 8 feet by 10, with a dirt floor and stone walls. There were no windows, no light except what filtered down from the open doors above. In the corner, huddled against the wall, was a woman. Her dress was torn and filthy, her hair matted and hanging in tangled clumps around her face. She raised one arm to shield her eyes from the evening light that must have seemed bright after so long in darkness. "Come on," Damon said gently, approaching slowly so as not to frighten her. "Let me help you." She tried to stand, but her legs would not support her. He caught her as she fell and lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, all bone and skin, her body trembling with weakness. He carried her up the stairs and out into the fresh air where she gasped and coughed, tears streaming down her face. "Water," she whispered. "Please." Damon had a canteen on his saddle. He carried her to the front of the building where his horse waited and carefully set her down, propping her against the wall. He retrieved the canteen and held it to her lips, tilting it slowly so she would not drink too fast and make herself sick. She drank greedily, water spilling down her chin, and then she began to cry in earnest, great heaving sobs that shook her entire frame. Damon knelt beside her, unsure what to do, finally settling on resting a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You are safe now," he said. "No one is going to hurt you." "My family," she managed between sobs. "They will come back. They will put me back down there." "Not while I am breathing, they would not." She looked at him then, really looked at him for the first time. Her eyes were blue, he noticed, a pale, clear blue like a mountain sky. Her face, beneath the dirt and grime, was delicate, featured with high cheekbones and a small, straight nose. She could not have been more than 21 or 22 years old. "Why would they do this to you?" Damon asked. Sarah looked away, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "Because I refused to marry the man they chose for me. Because I wanted to choose my own life. My father said I was willful and disobedient. My mother said I brought shame on the family. They said I could stay down there until I learned to be obedient." Damon felt his anger return, hotter than before. He had seen a lot of hard things in his years on the frontier, but the cruelty of family toward family always struck him as the worst kind of evil. "Where are they now?" "Your family?" "I do not know. They come every few days with food and water." "Not much, just enough to keep me alive. My father said I would break eventually. He said every woman breaks." "Well, he was wrong about that," Damon said firmly. "You did not break. You survived." He helped her to her feet, supporting most of her weight. She could barely walk, her legs weak from disuse and malnutrition. They needed to get her somewhere safe, somewhere she could recover, but he did not know this town or who could be trusted. "Is there anyone in Greeley who would help you? Friends?" She shook her head weakly. "My family knows everyone. They would just send me back, or worse, marry me off to that awful man anyway. Jacob Winters. He is 50 years old and already buried 2 wives. My father owes him money and decided I was payment enough." Damon made a decision then, though he could not have said exactly why. Maybe it was because he had sisters, and the thought of them being treated this way made his blood boil. Maybe it was something in those blue eyes when they looked at him with such desperate hope. Or maybe it was just that he was tired of riding alone and here was someone who needed him. "Then we leave," he said simply. "Tonight, as soon as you are able to ride." "But where would we go?" "Anywhere but here. I have money from the cattle drive. Enough to get us to Denver, maybe further if we need to go. We will figure out the rest as we go." "Why would you help me? You do not even know me." Damon met her eyes and spoke with complete honesty. "Because it is the right thing to do, because no one deserves what they did to you. And because I have the means to help, which makes it my responsibility." Fresh tears welled in her eyes, but these seemed different somehow. Not tears of despair, but of something else. Relief, perhaps, or gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not even know your name." "Damon Sullivan." "Thank you, Damon Sullivan. I will never forget this." He helped her onto his horse, then swung up behind her. She slumped against his chest, too weak to sit upright on her own. He wrapped one arm around her waist to steady her and took the reins with the other hand. "Wait," she said suddenly. "We cannot just leave. What if they try to put someone else down there? What if they do this to another girl?" Damon considered this. She was right. He could not leave that cellar ready and waiting for another victim. He dismounted and tied the horse to a post. "Stay here. I will be right back." He returned to the cellar and descended once more into that hellish pit. In the dim light, he could see the evidence of her imprisonment. A thin, dirty blanket in one corner, a bucket for waste, scratch marks on the walls where she had tried to claw her way out. The sight made him sick with fury. He climbed back up and looked around for something that would burn. The dry lumber stacked beside the building would do nicely. He began piling it into the cellar, making several trips until the space below was filled with wood. Then he struck a match and dropped it in. The fire caught quickly, flames licking up through the open cellar doors. He backed away and watched as it burned, the wood crackling and popping, smoke billowing up into the darkening sky. Let it burn, he thought. Let it burn until there was nothing left but ashes and memory. By the time he returned to his horse, people were starting to come out of nearby buildings to see what was burning. He did not wait around to answer questions. He mounted up behind Sarah and spurred the horse into a fast walk, heading for the edge of town. They had just reached the outskirts when a man's voice called out behind them. "Sarah, Sarah, you come back here right now." Damon looked back and saw 3 men running toward them. The one in front was older, maybe 50, with a thick beard and the kind of face that looked mean even in repose. The Anderson father, he assumed. "Go," Sarah whispered urgently. "Please just go." Damon did not need to be told twice. He kicked the horse into a gallop and they raced off into the gathering darkness, leaving Greeley and its cruelties behind them. They rode through the night, following the South Platte River north under a sky full of stars. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness, her body exhausted beyond measure. Damon kept one arm tight around her waist, holding her secure against him, and tried to think about what they would do next. He could not take her back to Montana. That would be the first place her family would look if they decided to pursue them. Denver was too obvious as well. They needed somewhere smaller, somewhere they could disappear for a while until Sarah recovered her strength, and they could figure out a more permanent solution. As dawn broke over the plains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Damon spotted a small farmhouse in the distance. Smoke rose from the chimney, suggesting someone was home and awake. He changed course and headed toward it. The farm was small but well-maintained, with a neat vegetable garden and a sturdy barn. A woman was outside feeding chickens when they rode up. She looked to be in her 40s, with dark hair going gray and kind brown eyes that went wide with concern when she saw Sarah's condition. "Merciful heavens," she said, setting down her bucket of feed and hurrying over. "What happened to this poor girl? She needs help," Damon said simply. "Food, rest, a place to recover. I can pay." The woman looked from Sarah to Damon and back again, clearly trying to make sense of the situation. Whatever she concluded, it must have satisfied her because she nodded decisively. "Bring her inside. My name is Martha Hayes. My husband is out checking the cattle, but he will be back shortly." Damon dismounted and carefully lifted Sarah down from the horse. Martha led them into the farmhouse, which was warm and smelled of baking bread. She directed him to lay Sarah on a bed in a small room off the kitchen. "When was the last time she ate?" Martha asked, already bustling around gathering supplies. "I do not know. She was locked in a cellar. Her own family did it to her." Martha's face hardened. "Some people do not deserve children," she said tersely. She brought water and clean cloths and began gently washing Sarah's face and hands. "You go on and tend to your horse. By the time you come back, I will have her cleaned up and fed." Damon hesitated, reluctant to leave Sarah with strangers despite Martha's obvious kindness. Sarah must have sensed his concern because she reached out and caught his hand. "It is all right," she said softly. "I trust her. Go take care of your horse." He squeezed her hand gently and then did as he was told. Outside, he unsaddled his horse and led the animal to the barn where he found hay and water. He took his time with the task, giving Martha space to help Sarah with the more intimate aspects of her care. When he returned to the house, the sun was fully up and a man had joined Martha in the kitchen. He was tall and weathered with calloused hands and a direct gaze. "Martha's husband, clearly. Thomas Hayes," the man said, extending a hand. "Martha tells me you rescued that girl from her family." Damon shook his hand. "Damon Sullivan, And yes, though I was just passing through. I heard her calling for help. Well, you did a good thing. Martha is getting her cleaned up and fed. She can stay here as long as she needs. We have the room and we could use the company, truth be told. Our children are all grown and moved on. I appreciate your kindness, but I cannot leave her here. Her family might come looking. I would not want to bring trouble to your door. Thomas considered this. Fair enough. But she is in no condition to travel yet. Give it a few days at least. Let her regain some strength. If trouble comes, well, I have dealt with trouble before. They spent 3 days on the Hayes farm. Martha fed Sarah broths and soft foods, slowly building up her strength. She washed and mended Sarah's dress, though it would never be truly clean again after its time in the cellar. Thomas offered one of his wife's old dresses instead, a simple blue cotton that fit reasonably well despite Sarah's thin frame. Damon slept in the barn, insisting he would not impose further on the Hayes hospitality. During the day he helped Thomas with farm chores, mending fences and tending to the animals. It felt good to do honest work with his hands, to be useful in concrete ways. On the third evening, Sarah was finally strong enough to sit at the table for dinner. Her hair was clean and braided, her face scrubbed of grime, and Damon was struck by how truly beautiful she was. Not just pretty, but beautiful in a way that came from somewhere deeper than physical features. "You are staring," she said, a slight smile playing at her lips. He looked away, embarrassed. "Sorry, I just noticed your hair is lighter than I thought, more blonde than brown. It has not been clean in so long I forgot what color it was myself." Martha laughed. "She is teasing you, Mr. Sullivan. That is a good sign. Shows her spirit is coming back." After dinner, Damon and Sarah walked outside together, moving slowly to accommodate her still weak legs. The evening air was cool and pleasant, carrying the scent of hay and horses. "I have been thinking about what to do next," Sarah said. "I cannot go back to Greeley. My father will just lock me up again or force me to marry Jacob Winters. But I also cannot ask you to keep caring for me. You have already done so much." "I am not going anywhere," Damon said firmly. "Not until I know you are safe and settled." "But why? We are strangers." "You have your own life to live." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "The truth is, I do not really have a life, Sarah. I have been drifting from job to job, town to town for 8 years now, never staying, never building anything permanent. Maybe I was waiting for a reason to stop moving." "Maybe you are that reason." She looked up at him with those clear blue eyes and he felt something shift in his chest. It was too soon to call it love, but it was definitely the beginning of something powerful. "I want to start over somewhere new," she said. "Somewhere my family will never find me. I want to build a real life, the kind I choose for myself. But I have no money, no skills beyond cooking and sewing. I would be dependent on charity." "What if you were not alone?" Damon heard himself say. "What if we went together? We could go west, maybe to California. Find a place to settle, build something together." "You mean as friends?" "I mean as whatever we decide we are. Partners, at least. I have money saved. You have determination and spirit. Together we could make a real go of it." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the darkening fields. "People would talk," she finally said. "A man and woman traveling together, not married. It would be scandalous. Then we get married. If you are willing, I mean. It does not have to be a real marriage, not at first. Just a legal arrangement to protect you and stop the gossip. Over time, maybe it could become something more. Or maybe we would just be friends who happen to be married. Either way, you would have protection and freedom." She turned to him, searching his face. "You would do that? Marry a woman you barely know just to help her?" "I would marry you, Sarah Anderson, because I think you are brave and strong and deserving of a good life. And because in these 3 days I have gotten to know you well enough to know I want to keep knowing you, if that makes any sense." A smile spread across her face, the first real smile he had seen from her. It transformed her entire appearance, making her look younger and lighter somehow. "It makes perfect sense," she said. "And yes, Damon Sullivan, I will marry you. For protection and freedom and the chance to build something real together." They were married 2 days later by a traveling preacher who happened through the Hayes farm. Martha and Thomas served as witnesses, and Martha cried happy tears throughout the brief ceremony. They had no rings, so Damon tied a piece of leather cord around Sarah's finger and promised to replace it with proper gold when they were able. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the preacher said. "You may kiss your bride." Damon looked at Sarah, uncertain. They had agreed this was primarily a practical arrangement, and he did not want to presume. But she smiled at him and rose on her toes, pressing a soft kiss to his lips. It was brief and chaste, but it sent warmth flooding through his entire body. They left the Hayes farm the next morning with full packs. A second horse Martha and Thomas insisted on gifting them, and heartfelt promises to write when they were settled. Sarah cried as she hugged Martha goodbye, thanking her over and over for her kindness. "You take care of each other," Martha said, looking between them with maternal concern. "And remember, a good marriage is built on friendship and respect first. The rest will follow in time." They rode west through Colorado territory, taking their time and avoiding major towns where Sarah's family might have connections. Damon had decided to head for the Wyoming territory, to an area near the Big Horn Mountains where he had worked a cattle drive years before. The land there was beautiful and wild, with good grazing and plenty of water. It would be perfect for a small ranch. As they traveled, they talked. They shared stories of their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. Damon learned that Sarah loved to read, but had rarely been allowed books by her strict father. She dreamed of having a library someday, shelves filled with stories and knowledge. She loved horses, and had secretly learned to ride as a child by watching the ranch hands and practicing when no one was looking. Sarah learned that Damon had grown up in Missouri, the only boy among 4 children. His father had died when he was young, and he had headed west at 18 to make his fortune and send money home to support his mother and sisters. He had a good head for numbers and had been saving carefully for years, planning to eventually buy land of his own. He loved the open spaces of the frontier, the way the sky seemed to go on forever. They camped under the stars most nights, maintaining a respectful distance. Damon would lay out his bedroll on one side of the fire, Sarah on the other. But as the days passed, the space between them seemed to shrink. One cool night she moved her bedroll closer to the fire, which happened to be closer to him. The next night closer still. Within a week they were sleeping side by side, not touching but near enough to hear each other breathing. One evening about 2 weeks into their journey, they made camp beside a clear mountain stream. Sarah went down to the water to wash while Damon started the fire and prepared their dinner. When she returned, her hair was wet and hanging loose around her shoulders, catching the firelight like spun gold. "I have been thinking," she said, settling beside him, "about what Martha said, about friendship and respect coming first. What about it? I think she was right. And I think we have that. Friendship and respect, I mean. I feel like I can talk to you about anything. I trust you completely." Damon met her eyes. "I feel the same way about you. Then maybe this marriage could be more than just a practical arrangement, if you wanted it to be. If you felt that way about me." His heart was suddenly pounding hard enough that he was sure she could hear it. "Are you saying what I think you are saying?" She reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I am saying that somewhere along this journey, I started falling in love with you. Real love, not just gratitude, and I am hoping you might feel the same way. Damon brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. Sarah, I have been half in love with you since I first saw you smile. I was just too afraid to say anything, too worried that you might feel obligated because I helped you. No obligation, she said firmly. Just my heart choosing yours, if you will have it. Instead of answering with words, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her properly. Not the chaste kiss from their wedding, but a real kiss full of longing and promise. She kissed him back with equal fervor, her arms wrapping around his neck. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damon rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Sarah Sullivan. I did not plan on it, but there it is. I love you and I want this to be a real marriage in every way. Then it will be, she whispered. Starting tonight. That night they moved their bedrolls together and consummated their marriage under the stars, with only the mountains as witnesses. It was tender and sweet, both of them learning each other for the first time. Afterwards, Sarah lay with her head on Damon's chest, his arm wrapped protectively around her. This is what freedom feels like, she said softly. Choosing who to love, choosing who to be. Thank you for giving me this. You gave it to yourself by surviving, by refusing to break. I just opened the door. You did more than that. You built me a future. You gave me hope when I had none left. They reached Wyoming territory 3 weeks after leaving the Hayes farm. Damon led them to a beautiful valley nestled in the foothills of the Big Horn Mountains. A stream ran through it, willows growing thick along the banks. The grass was lush and green, perfect for cattle. And best of all, it was unclaimed land, free for the taking under the Homestead Act. What do you think? Damon asked, watching Sarah's face as she took it all in. She turned in a slow circle, her eyes bright with wonder. It is perfect, absolutely perfect. Is this really ours? It can be. We file a claim, build a house, work the land for 5 years, and then it is ours free and clear. 160 acres of our own. Then let us claim it. Let us build our home right here. They rode to the nearest land office in a town called Buffalo and filed their claim. The clerk looked them over with mild suspicion at first, probably wondering if they were really up to the challenge of frontier homesteading, but the claim was legal and properly filed. They were now the official owners of 160 acres of prime Wyoming grassland. The first order of business was shelter. Damon had done plenty of construction work in his wandering years, and he set about building them a proper cabin. Sarah helped where she could, hauling rocks for the foundation and chinking the gaps between logs with mud and moss. It took 6 weeks of hard work, but by the end they had a sturdy one-room cabin with a stone fireplace, a proper door with a lock, and 2 windows with shutters. It was not fancy, but it was theirs and it was built with their own hands. Damon carried Sarah over the threshold the day they moved in, both of them laughing with joy. "Welcome home, Mrs. Sullivan," he said, setting her down gently. "Home," she repeated, looking around their cabin with obvious delight. "I have never had a real home before, not one that was truly mine. This is the most beautiful place I have ever seen." They spent the rest of the autumn preparing for winter. Damon hunted deer and elk, and Sarah preserved the meat and tanned the hides. They gathered wild berries and nuts, traded with nearby homesteaders for vegetables and flour. Damon built a small barn for their horses and a chicken coop, and Sarah somehow acquired 6 hens from a neighboring farm. As winter set in and snow began to fall, they settled into a comfortable domestic rhythm. Damon would tend to the animals and chop firewood while Sarah cooked and kept the cabin warm. In the evenings they would sit by the fire and talk, or Damon would read aloud from the few books they had acquired in Buffalo. Sarah had been right about loving books. She would listen with rapt attention, sometimes asking him to reread passages she particularly enjoyed. One night in December, as a blizzard howled outside their cabin, Sarah made an announcement. "I think I might be with child," she said, her voice soft but certain. Damon looked up from the harness he was mending, his eyes going wide. "Are you sure?" "Fairly sure. I have not had my monthly courses since before we were married, and I have been sick in the mornings. Martha told me those were the signs to watch for." He set aside his work and moved to sit beside her, taking her hands in his. "How do you feel about it?" "Terrified," she admitted, "but also happy, excited." "Is that strange?" "Not strange at all. I feel the same way, terrified and excited." He pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. "You are going to be an amazing mother." "I hope so. I know what kind of mother not to be, at least. That is something." "You will be everything your mother was not. Kind and loving and encouraging. Our child will be so lucky to have you." Their son was born in late July of 1879, delivered by a midwife from Buffalo who stayed with them for a week to help Sarah recover. They named him Thomas Daniel Sullivan, after Thomas Hayes and Damon's late father. He had his mother's blue eyes and his father's dark hair, and from the moment Damon first held him, he knew he would do anything to protect this small, perfect person. Sarah took to motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else. She was patient and gentle with Thomas, singing to him and telling him stories. Damon would often come in from working the land to find her nursing their son by the window, sunlight streaming over both of them like a benediction. "I never knew I could love anyone as much as I love you and Thomas," she told him one evening. "It is almost frightening how much I love you both." "That is not fear," Damon said, kissing her softly. "That is just love, and you deserve every bit of it." As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, the ranch grew as well. Damon used the last of his saved money to buy a small herd of cattle from a rancher who was heading back east. 20 head to start, but it was enough. He worked from sunup to sundown, building fences and digging irrigation ditches and tending to the herd. Sarah kept their home and raised their son, and somehow still found time to start a vegetable garden that produced more food than they could eat themselves. In the spring of 1881, Sarah announced she was pregnant again. This time she was less frightened and more simply excited. Their daughter, Rebecca Ann Sullivan, was born in January of 1882 during a terrible snowstorm that trapped them in the cabin for 3 days. Damon delivered the baby himself with Sarah's guidance, and when he heard his daughter's first cry, he wept with relief and joy. "2 perfect children," Sarah said, exhausted but radiant as she held Rebecca. "We are truly blessed." "We are," Damon agreed, sitting beside her with Thomas on his lap. "More blessed than I ever imagined possible." The years passed in a blur of hard work and simple joys. The cattle herd grew. They added onto the cabin, giving the children their own room and adding a proper kitchen. Damon built Sarah the bookshelf she had dreamed of, and slowly they filled it with books ordered from catalogs or purchased on rare trips to larger towns. Every evening after dinner, the family would gather and Damon would read aloud while Sarah mended clothes and the children played. In the summer of 1884, a rider came to their ranch. He was an older man, weathered and worn, and he asked to speak with Sarah. Damon stayed close by, protective instinct flaring, but the man seemed harmless enough. "You do not know me," the man said to Sarah, "but I know who you are." Or who you were, Sarah Anderson from Greeley, Colorado. Sarah went pale but stood her ground. "I am Sarah Sullivan now, and if my family sent you to fetch me, you can turn right around. I am not going anywhere." The man shook his head. "Your family did not send me. In fact, your family is dead. All of them. There was a fire 2 years back, burned down the boarding house where they were living. Your parents and both your brothers died in the blaze." Sarah sat down heavily on the porch steps. "All of them? Dead?" "Yes, madam. I am a lawyer, hired by the bank to track down any remaining heirs. Turns out your father had a fair amount of money saved, despite his debts. With your family gone, it all goes to you. Nearly $3,000. $3,000. It was a fortune, enough to expand the ranch significantly or send the children to proper schools when they were older." But Damon watched Sarah's face and saw only complex emotion. Not joy at the money, but something harder to read. After the lawyer left, promising to arrange transfer of the funds to their bank in Buffalo, Sarah sat quietly for a long time. Damon sent the children to play by the stream and sat beside his wife, waiting. "I should feel something," she finally said. "My parents are dead. My brothers are dead. But all I feel is numb. Is that terrible of me?" "No," Damon said firmly. "They locked you in a cellar and left you to die. You do not owe them your grief. I keep thinking about that cellar, wondering if they suffered when they died, if they were frightened. Part of me hopes they were. Is that evil? Does that make me a bad person?" He put his arm around her and held her close. "It makes you human. They hurt you terribly. It is natural to want them to have suffered some consequence. But Sarah, you have to let it go now. They are gone. They cannot hurt you anymore. You are free in every possible way." She leaned into him, breathing deeply. "You are right. I am free. We are free. And we have this beautiful life we built together. That is what matters." With the inheritance money, they expanded the ranch significantly. Damon hired 2 ranch hands to help with the cattle, which now numbered over 100 head. Sarah used some of the money to order books and school supplies, and she began teaching not just her own children but the children of neighboring homesteaders as well. 3 times a week, half a dozen children would come to the Sullivan Ranch for lessons in reading, writing, and arithmetic. "You are a natural teacher," Damon told her, watching her patiently explain fractions to a struggling student. "Patient and clear. I love it," she admitted. "I love seeing their faces light up when they understand something new. It makes me feel useful beyond just cooking and cleaning. You are remarkable, you know that. The girl I found in that cellar has become an amazing woman, a wonderful mother, a gifted teacher, a strong partner. I am in awe of you." She smiled and kissed him. "I could not have become any of those things without you. You gave me the chance. You believed in me when no one else did." In 1886, Sarah became pregnant with their 3rd child. She was 30 years old now, and this pregnancy was harder than the first 2. She tired easily and was often sick. Damon worried constantly, but Sarah remained optimistic. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," she reminded him. "I will be fine." Their son Matthew James Sullivan was born in April of 1887. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Damon genuinely feared he might lose his wife. But Sarah was strong and stubborn, and she brought their 3rd child into the world with a final triumphant cry. Matthew was small but healthy, with Sarah's blonde hair and Damon's brown eyes. 3 children, Sarah said wonderingly, holding Matthew while Thomas and Rebecca crowded close to meet their new brother. "Our family is complete." "Are you sure?" Damon teased. "We could go for 4. She laughed and threw a pillow at him. 3 is perfect. Any more and I would need to be 4 people to keep up with them all." Life settled into a new rhythm with 3 children. Thomas, now 8 years old, was already helping with ranch work, following his father around and learning the cattle business. Rebecca at 5 was her mother's shadow, helping with cooking and teaching. Baby Matthew was a cheerful, easy child who rarely cried and seemed content to watch the world go by. The ranch continued to prosper. They built a larger barn and added more land to their grazing area. Damon's reputation as an honest rancher spread, and he was able to sell cattle at premium prices. Sarah's school had grown to include 12 regular students, and she was teaching more advanced subjects now, including literature and history. One evening in the autumn of 1890, after the children were asleep, Sarah and Damon sat on their porch watching the sun set over the mountains. It had become their tradition, this quiet time together at the end of each day. "You ever think about that night?" Sarah asked. "When you found me in the cellar?" "Sometimes," Damon admitted. "Usually when I am counting my blessings and trying to figure out what I did to deserve them." "You saved my life that night. You know that, do you not? If you had not heard me calling, I would have died down there. Then I am grateful every day that I heard you, that I followed the sound, that I broke down that door." Sarah took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "I have been thinking about something. I want to help other women. Women in situations like mine, trapped or abused or with nowhere to go. We have this ranch, this space. What if we used it to help people? What are you suggesting? What if we opened our home to women who need help? Not permanently, just until they can get on their feet. We have the room now with the additions you built. We have the resources. And I have experience surviving the kind of cruelty these women face." Damon considered this. It would be complicated, certainly. More mouths to feed, more people to house. But he looked at his wife, at the passion in her eyes, and he knew he could not say no. "If that is what you want to do, then we will do it. This is your home too. You should fill it with whatever brings you joy." She threw her arms around him, hugging him tight. "Thank you. Thank you for always supporting my dreams, even the ones I do not know I have until they appear." Over the next few years, the Sullivan Ranch became known as a safe haven for women in trouble. Sarah would travel to Buffalo and other nearby towns, quietly letting people know that any woman who needed help had a place with them. They housed abused wives, women fleeing arranged marriages, widows with nowhere to go, women escaping all manner of bad situations. Some stayed for weeks, others for months. Sarah would help them recover their health and spirits, teach them skills they could use to support themselves, and help them make plans for independent futures. Damon watched his wife flourish in this work. She had a gift for it, a deep empathy born from her own suffering. She never judged, never pushed, just provided safety and support until each woman was ready to move forward. Dozens of women passed through their ranch over the years, and every single one left stronger than she arrived. "You are changing the world," Damon told Sarah one night after they had helped yet another woman find employment and housing in Buffalo. "One woman at a time, you are making the world better." "We are making it better," she corrected. "This is our work, not just mine. You provide the resources and support that make it possible. You welcome these women into our home and treat them with respect. You show them that not all men are cruel. That matters more than you know." Their children grew up surrounded by this work, and it shaped them into compassionate, strong people. Thomas became a skilled rancher, taking over more and more of the daily operations as he moved through his teenage years. He treated every woman who came to their ranch with gentle courtesy, and Damon often saw glimpses of himself in his son's protective instincts. Rebecca inherited her mother's gift for teaching and her passion for helping others. By the time she was 15, she was running the school almost entirely on her own, teaching everything from basic reading to advanced mathematics. She talked about becoming a doctor someday, a radical dream for a girl in rural Wyoming, but one her parents fully supported. Matthew was the quieter one, more likely to be found with a book than working cattle. He loved stories and could recite long passages from memory. Sarah predicted he would be a writer someday, and both she and Damon encouraged his literary interests. In the spring of 1895, on their 17th wedding anniversary, Damon took Sarah on a trip to Denver. It was the first time they had been away from the ranch together since arriving in Wyoming all those years ago. Thomas was 20 and more than capable of managing things in their absence. They stayed in a real hotel with hot running water and ate in restaurants. Damon bought Sarah the gold ring he had promised her all those years ago, replacing the leather cord she still wore. They went to the theater and saw a Shakespeare play, which made Sarah cry with joy. For 5 days they were not ranchers or teachers or refuge providers. They were just a man and woman in love, enjoying each other's company. On their last night in Denver, lying in their hotel bed, Sarah turned to Damon with tears in her eyes. "What is wrong?" he asked, immediately concerned. "Nothing is wrong. Everything is right. That is why I am crying. I am just so happy, Damon, happier than I ever thought possible. When I was in that cellar, I thought my life was over. I thought I would die there in the dark, alone and unloved. But then you found me. You broke down that door and you built me this beautiful life. You gave me love and children and purpose. You gave me everything." He pulled her close, his own eyes stinging with tears. "You did just as much for me, Sarah. Before I found you, I was drifting. I had no purpose, no direction, no real home. You gave me all those things. You are my home. You always have been." They made love slowly, tenderly, celebrating 17 years of marriage and the many more yet to come. Afterwards, Sarah fell asleep in his arms, and Damon lay awake thinking about how different his life might have been if he had not ridden into Greeley that day. If he had not heard that desperate voice calling from beneath the earth. If he had not decided to break down that cellar door. But he had heard her. He had broken down that door, and everything good in his life had flowed from that single decision. It was, he thought, the best thing he had ever done or would ever do. They returned to the ranch to find everything running smoothly. Thomas had handled a minor issue with a broken fence, and Rebecca had managed the household and continued teaching classes. Even young Matthew had helped, doing chores without being asked, and keeping track of supplies they needed from town. "Our children are growing up," Sarah said with a mixture of pride and sadness. "Soon they will have their own lives, their own families. Then we will have raised them right," Damon said. "The goal is not to keep them dependent. It is to prepare them to fly." Thomas got married in 1897 to a girl from Buffalo named Emma Dawson. She was a practical, kind young woman who fit right into the Sullivan family. They built a house on the far end of the ranch property, and Thomas took over full management of the cattle operation. Within a year, Emma was pregnant with the first Sullivan grandchild. "We are going to be grandparents," Sarah said wonderingly. "When did we get old enough for that? Speak for yourself," Damon teased. "I am still young and spry." She laughed and swatted his arm. "You have gray in your beard now, old man. You cannot deny it. Distinguished gray. There is a difference." Their first grandchild, a boy named James, was born in the spring of 1898. Damon held his grandson for the first time and felt something shift in his chest. This was his legacy. This boy, this family, this ranch they had built from nothing. This was what it had all been for. Over the next few years, their family continued to grow. Thomas and Emma had 3 more children. Rebecca went east to study medicine at a women's college in Philadelphia, the first person in the family to attend university. Matthew started writing articles for newspapers, his clear prose and vivid descriptions earning him a modest but growing reputation. Through it all, Sarah continued her work helping women in need. She was 60 years old now, her blonde hair gone silver, but she had lost none of her determination or compassion. If anything, she had grown more passionate about the work over the years. In the autumn of 1905, A young woman arrived at the ranch in terrible condition. She had been beaten badly, one eye swollen shut, several ribs broken. Her husband had nearly killed her before she managed to escape. Sarah took her in immediately, nursing her back to health over the course of several weeks. Damon watched his wife with the young woman and marveled at her patience and gentleness. Even after all these years, even after helping hundreds of women, she treated each one as if they were the only person in the world who mattered. "You are a remarkable woman," he told Sarah one evening as they sat on their porch, that familiar habit they had maintained for decades. "I just do what needs to be done," she said simply. "No, you do more than that. You give people hope. You show them that survival is possible, that life can be good again after terrible things. You are living proof of that." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "We are living proof. All of this, everything we built, we did together. I could not have done any of it alone. Neither could I." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. The ranch spread out before them, buildings and fences and grazing cattle, all of it theirs. All of it built with their own hands and sustained by their love. "You ever regret it?" Sarah asked softly. "Marrying me, taking on all this responsibility?" Damon pulled her closer. "Not for a single second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. This life we built together is the best thing I have ever been part of. I would not change a moment of it. Not even the hard parts, the lean years when we barely had enough, the times I was difficult and stubborn. Especially not those parts. Those are what made us strong, what made us real." He kissed the top of her head. "I love you, Sarah Sullivan. I have loved you since you smiled at me for the first time on the Hayes farm. I will love you until the day I die and probably beyond." She turned and kissed him properly, a kiss that still held passion despite their age. "And I love you, my rescuer, my partner, my home." The years continued to pass peacefully. They watched their grandchildren grow, celebrated family gatherings and holidays, continued their work with the ranch and helping women in need. Life was good, better than good. It was exactly what they had hoped for all those years ago when they first stood in that beautiful valley and decided to build a home. In the spring of 1912, Damon fell ill. It started as a cough, but progressed quickly to pneumonia. Sarah nursed him diligently, barely sleeping, applying every remedy she knew. For a while it seemed like he might recover, but then he took a turn for the worse. On a warm May evening, with Sarah holding his hand and all three of their children gathered around his bed, Damon Sullivan passed away peacefully. He was 60 years old and had lived a full, rich life. Sarah was devastated but not destroyed. She had Damon's love in her heart, his legacy all around her, and their family to carry forward everything they had built together. She continued running the ranch with Thomas's help, continued teaching and helping women in need. She lived for 20 more years, long enough to see great-grandchildren born and to know that the Sullivan name and everything it stood for would continue for generations. When Sarah finally passed away in 1932 at the age of 76, she was surrounded by family and friends who loved her. She was buried beside Damon on a hill overlooking their ranch, with a simple headstone that read Sarah Sullivan. Survivor, teacher, helper of women, beloved wife and mother. At her funeral, Rebecca, now a respected doctor, stood and spoke about her mother's legacy. "My mother's life could have ended in that cellar in Greeley," she said. "But my father heard her calling and he broke down that door. Together, they built not just a ranch but a refuge, not just a family but a legacy of compassion and strength. My mother survived terrible cruelty and chose to respond with love. She helped hundreds of women escape situations like the one she endured. She showed all of us that no matter how dark things seem, there is always hope for a better future. Thomas added his own words. My father always said that hearing my mother calling for help that day was the best thing that ever happened to him. But I think the truth is that they saved each other. He gave her freedom. She gave him purpose. Together they built something beautiful and lasting. This ranch, this family, this legacy of helping others, that is what they leave behind. Matthew, now a published author, read from a book he had written about the Sullivan family story. It was a tale of survival and love, of second chances and chosen family, of building something real from nothing but determination and hope. It was the true story of his parents, and it had touched thousands of readers across the country. After the funeral, the family gathered at the ranch house, the same house Damon and Sarah had built with their own hands 65 years earlier. It had been expanded and modernized over the years, but the original room was still there, still in use. The fireplace Damon had built still warmed the house on cold nights. The bookshelf he had made for Sarah still held her treasured collection of books. Thomas stood at the window, looking out over the ranch, his own grandchildren playing in the yard. Emma came and stood beside him, taking his hand. Your parents built something special here, she said. Something that will last long after we are all gone. They did, Thomas agreed. And it all started because my father heard my mother calling and decided to help. One moment of compassion changed everything. That is what your mother always taught, Emma said. One act of kindness can change a life. One door broken down can lead to a whole new world. Years continued to pass, and the Sullivan Ranch remained. Thomas ran it until he was too old, then passed it to his son James, who passed it to his own children. The tradition of helping women in need continued, adapted to modern times but never abandoned. The school Sarah started evolved into a community center that provided education and resources to anyone who needed them. 75 years after Damon broke down that cellar door, his great-great-granddaughter stood in that same spot in Greeley, Colorado. The old boarding house was long gone, replaced by modern buildings, but she knew this was where it had happened, where her great-great-grandmother had called out from the darkness, where her great-great-grandfather had stopped to listen. She placed a bouquet of flowers on the ground, right where the cellar door would have been. Thank you, she whispered to ancestors she had never met but whose legacy lived in her blood. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for breaking down that door. Thank you for building something beautiful from something terrible. Thank you for showing us all that love can triumph over cruelty, and that hope can survive even in the darkest places. A breeze stirred her hair, warm and gentle like a blessing. She smiled and walked back to her car, carrying with her the story of Sarah and Damon Sullivan. A cowboy and a woman locked in a cellar, a broken door and a built future. A love story that began with a desperate cry for help and became a legacy that would endure for generations to come. The Sullivan Ranch still stood in Wyoming, still helping people, still teaching that one act of compassion can change everything. And somewhere, perhaps in whatever comes after this life, Sarah and Damon were together still, watching over the beautiful world they had built with love, determination, and an unshakable belief in second chances.